286 Clyde Street featured in the very first Glasgow video, Glasgow Wandering, made in 2014, and its desecration has been documented in the subsequent Glasgow videos. But now, with completion of the 4-star Clayton Hotel, where 286 once stood, it's time for a verdict. Last year I pondered how a successful marriage could be formed between this multi-storey design and the old custom house, utilised as the hotel entrance. The marriage is neither successful nor sympathetic. In fact, there is no marriage. The modern structure abuts the old custom house with an absence of integration and flow. They are separate entities. These comments sound negative, but the hotel is not offensive. In fact, it's all right. The hotel's finalisation concludes the 286 Clyde Street chapter, unless Clayton Hotels wish to supply my accommodation for next year's Glasgow shoot, in which case I'll happily cover what it's like to stay there. A few yards away is James Watt Street, where sits the wonderfully grimy former tobacco warehouse. Built in 1854, the upper floors were added in 1911. I particularly like the barred windows, necessary to prevent the valuable and easily saleable tobacco's theft. Smoking was big business in the early 1900s and was to become bigger. I read that by the 1950s, 80% of UK men regularly smoked, and smoking is man's work. From a grimy warehouse to a grimy theatre. I've long fancied a wander inside the 1904 Frank Matcham designed King's Theatre. The exterior projects an appealing faded grandeur, and there's a painted stone sign, a favourite detail of mine. Moving away from grime, the corner of Waterloo Street and Blytheswood Street hosts Fortune House. This 5-storey commercial building was designed for the Metropolitan Vickers Electrical Company Limited by James Taylor Thompson and dates from 1925. The style is modern classical, with a hint of Art Deco to my eyes. It's a most pleasing structure. Wandering along Sauchiehall Street, I noticed a long queue for Firewater Bar. It must be good, I thought to myself, because it's only 6:15 p.m. Their website reveals Thursdays at Firewater is Camden Rocks, a student night from 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. If they don't play Babies by Pulp, it's a student disco in name only. Star Bar on Eglinton Street was recommended to me as an unspoilt, earthy Glasgow bar, so I headed for a glass of lemonade. It was as described, with a friendly atmosphere, and I was much taken by the large photo of the pub behind the bar, with a cash-only sign pinned to it. Cash is good. I attempted to replicate the photo the next day. Another recommendation was the Lauriston Bar on Bridge Street. I ordered my customary glass of lemonade, but the gent behind the bar refused payment, turning to serve the next customer. I was perplexed, and after a few minutes asked another member of staff if I could pay for my drink, payment being refused once again. The original gent came over to explain they don't charge for mixers. I protested this wasn't a mixer, it was half a pint. This cut no ice with him.
If we start charging for mixers, we'll be charging for water next, and if we get to that stage, it won't be worth opening,
he said. I liked the Lauriston. It had a bohemian sixth-form common room atmosphere with eclectic clientele, and was another cash-only pub, or no cash if you drink lemonade. Glasgow Art Club was founded in 1867 by William Denniston and 10 other amateur artists, moving to its current location, 185 Bath Street, in 1893. It was here that I was to meet William McClymont, who had arranged a tour of the club and lunch with club president and artist Robert Kelsey. The site was originally 2 townhouses, constructed in the 1830s, with facades probably by John Baird. Art Club member and architect John Keppy designed the 2 houses' conversion into the club, adding the gallery over the back garden, with his apprentice Rennie Mackintosh responsible for decorative elements of the gallery. A photo of Mackintosh is prominently hung in the dining room. That Mackintosh designed the gallery's decorations in his early 20s is most impressive. The gallery has been extensively refurbished, with particular attention paid to reproducing the colours and design of the frieze. The fireplaces were originally to be constructed of stone, but this was deemed too costly, so wood was utilised instead. Both fireplaces contain the letters GAC for Glasgow Art Club, these letters being replicated on some of the air inlets in the gallery. The billiard room, snooker tables now sadly absent, hosts exhibitions, New Scottish Furniture being the exhibition for our visit. The exhibitions are open to all. These photos from 2007 on canmore.org show the billiard room with snooker tables present. The library can be hired for lunch or dinner, with seating available for 20. Robert informed us he's always intended to work his way through the books in the library, but he hasn't got around to it yet. The stained glass windows in the bar area attracted me. These were found in storage and incorporated during refurbishment at the insistence of a lady member who oversaw the renovations. Originally the bar didn't exist, drinks being dispensed through a serving hatch. Throughout the club are numbered pieces. These are club members' works and are available to purchase. Tour over, we headed to the dining room for lunch. Like the exhibitions, the dining room is open to all, and from the menu I chose the beer-battered fish and chips, which was most tasty. During lunch, Robert gave a fascinating insight into his working practices and inspirations for his forthcoming London exhibition. He also mentioned the art club has reciprocal memberships with other clubs, one of which is the well-known London lovey haunt, the Garrick Club. William very kindly settled the lunch bill, and Robert made his way to an appointment, while William and I strolled to Central Station in the rain, him mocking my handbag brolly. Real men favour a collapsible umbrella. While at Central Station, I shot a photo of William with the main concourse as a backdrop, after which he headed for his train. The rain put me in a quandary. These videos are wandering based, but it was just too wet for walking any distance. I know, I'll ride the subway to Partick and shoot Fir Hill, the Partick Thistle football ground. Alighting at Partick, I looked up a route on Google Maps. Hold on, the stadium is nowhere near Partick Station. That's a typical underhand Partick trick. So it was back on the subway to St George Cross, and a much shorter rain-sodden walk. While shooting the stadium exterior, a gent working at the ground asked if I wanted to come in and shoot the stadium. Yes please, I replied. Yet another unsolicited act of Glasgow kindness, and reiterates what I've always said, sort of, about the Particks. They're wonderful salt-of-the-earth people, and I won't have a word said against them. I'd read, after some time closed, the Griffin and its fantasy French cafe facade was once again open, and popped in for my evening glass of lemonade. There was a singing guitarist performing, and by 10:30 p.m. the place was packed with happy people enjoying well-known songs and joining in the choruses. I wasn't meeting anyone today and fancied a trip to the seaside, so headed to Central Station and caught the train to Ayr. Ayr Station and adjacent station hotel are in a sorry state. Netting to catch falling slates covers the station roof, and the derelict hotel is completely shrouded and on the building's danger list. The station has a sign reading "Welcome to Ayr" above a boarded up, overgrown entrance, which encapsulates the station's predicament. A 92-page June 2023 Ayrshire Council report considers options for the station and the hotel. Basically, there are two options: refurbishment or demolition, with demolition and a newly built station the most likely. Of course, if this was Glasgow, the structures would have mysteriously
Gone on fire.
and even more mysteriously resulted in no prosecutions. My first destination was the 1862 opened-air cemetery. I adore cemeteries. Near the main entrance, the gravestones are set on grassed islands in 3 concentric circles. This layout leads me to think the circles denote social standing of the buried, with the centre section having the highest standing. Of course, it could all be deeply Masonic. This is Ayrshire, after all, a stronghold of Masonic nonsense. The inordinate number of obelisk gravestones compounded my thoughts, as obelisks are linked to Freemasonry too. Worse than the obelisk's Masonic connotations, though, is that some are polished granite. Polished granite is the devil's work, like Masonry. Ayr Racecourse holds jump races, including the Scottish Grand National, and flat races, the most prestigious race being the Ayr Gold Cup. Unfortunately, I missed the Gold Cup by 1 week. My poor timing becoming even more inopportune when it appeared access to land behind Tesco on Whitletts Road allowed a perfect view of the racing free of charge. I inquired if this was the case with a passing lady.
Oh yes,
She said.
and you can get even closer further round.
Do locals take advantage of this access?
Yes, it's quite popular.
My journo skills are second to none. Somerset Park is from football's bygone age, illustrated by their forthcoming fixture board. A wooden frame with hooks on which painted tiles are hung to display the date, time and opponent. This fixture board pleased me so much I spent many minutes lost in reverie, transported to a time when football clubs represented their location and community. Somerset Park is not a time capsule, however, and work has begun on a new north stand, designed with a top tier of corporate boxes, middle tier seating 700 and terraced bottom tier. Maybe these steps will be incorporated into the new stand. Climbing steps to enter a football ground for the first time is a rite of passage. While shooting the 1932 opened Orient Cinema, a passing lady said,
That used to be orange, a long time ago.
and continued walking before I could ask any questions. I love these random interactions. From this faded poster, it appears the Orient's most recent incarnation was as Babylon Nightclub. After shooting the harbour with Aaron in the background, I purchased some chicken noodles and headed to Wellington Square to eat. Wellington Square was most pleasant, but the noodles were dreadful. No veg, onions or garlic in the noodles. No lightness of touch nor flavour. Just chicken in gravy and noodles. Bland beyond belief. Muttering profanities after such an unsatisfactory lunch, I headed for the beach. My reason for visiting Ayr. With feet on the sand, my tasteless lunch was forgotten, and I drifted happily to Doon Foot, avoiding the numerous jellyfish, before retracing my steps along the beach and back to the train station, hoping it hadn't fallen down since the morning. Hours after writing the previous on September the 25th, Furniture Went Mad sent me a BBC link reporting the hotel had
Gone on fire.
again after being set alight earlier in the year. That evening in Glasgow I shot stock footage. While filming a view of St Vincent Street, these two ladies on the left passed and asked, I hope a frame hold will suffice for you ladies. Shooting completed, I headed to Steps Bar. As I entered, Barry Manilow's Mandy was playing. The next track was Bloodhound Gang Discovery Channel, followed by a shouty grunge track, 3 diverse tunes. The excellent Astonishing Glasgow series on the BT Justice YouTube channel covers Steps Bar far better than I can in his episode 46, The Two Queens. There's a link below. Back in the hotel, I glanced at my fitness band. After the splendour of Central Station as a departure point for yesterday's air trip, it was the utilitarian, pragmatic Queen Street Station serving as a starting point for the journey to Stirling and a meet with Furniture Went Mad, who writes all the music for the channel. Typically unprepared, I was relying on Mr Mad to guide our wander, and he chose the Old Town Cemetery to begin, a choice I heartily endorsed. Before reaching the cemetery, lamps outside the municipal buildings on Corn Exchange Road prompted Mr. Mad to inform me that gas lamps bearing the city coat of arms used to be installed outside the sitting provost's house, provosts not having official residences. A provost, for those ignorant English pig dogs like myself, holds similar office to a mayor. Victorian cemeteries are cool. Overgrown tumbling Victorian cemeteries like London's Abney Park and Nunhead are even cooler. However, Stirling Old Town Cemetery is none the worse for its 2009 completed £1.7 million refurbishment. The cemetery is 3 parts, Holyrood being the eldest, Valley Cemetery next, and Mars Walk Garden the newest section. Opened in 1858, Valley Cemetery is garden-esque in design. Garden-esque was a style advanced by Scottish botanist John Claudius Loudon, and is characterised by exotic annuals, naturalistic lakes, abstract shapes and sweeping thoroughfares. Valley Cemetery's thoroughfares being wide enough to allow carriage access to each plot. Statues of notable Presbyterians were installed in the cemetery, aimed at adding educational and improving dimensions, and at one point there were guides to show tourists around. It was hoped these combined elements would elevate the cemetery to a desirable destination of interest for tourists, along with the popular castle. Also, the cemetery paths were purposely routed to access the main town walkways, leading tourists to discover other aspects of Stirling. Of course, the elephant in the room is the Masonic Star Pyramid. While walking along the River Forth towards Cambus Kenneth Abbey, Mr. Mad related a tale from a council insider, that instead of a new bridge crossing, the council discussed a submarine crossing. Now, something may have been lost in the retelling to him, but it's a good story. The 13th century bell tower is all that's left standing of the 1140 founded abbey. The tower's relatively good condition, the result of being extensively renovated in 1859. There are foundations of the abbey's other structures, but after falling into disuse during the Scottish Reformation, the abbey came under the jurisdiction of John Erskine, military governor of Stirling Castle, who removed much of the structure's stonework for construction projects in the castle. After a curtailed exploration of the abbey, rain had dampened us and our enthusiasm. Plus Mr. Mad had to return to cook what working class heroes like he and I call tea, and others call dinner. So we headed back to the train station. Exiting Queen Street, I spent 30 minutes crouching under my handbag brolly, attempting to shoot arty rain footage. My rain tolerance exhausted, it was time to return to base. For a change of clothes and shoes. The shoes rested on the heater to dry, not for the first time this trip. And the umbrella placed in the shower to drip. Thankfully, the rain eventually ceased, and I wandered to Pacific Quay to take a stock-long exposure of the BBC building, where lights blazed from every unoccupied window, wasting the licence payers' money. And this shot from Point House Road footbridge, looking towards my new favourite place, Partick. By now it was 11 p.m, and being a Sunday night, few pubs were open. I settled on the Scotia at 112 Stockwell Street. Glass of lemonade purchased, I sat at the bar checking the weather for tomorrow's shoot, when a gent sat beside me. He had obviously enjoyed the pleasure of drink, but not the pleasure of soap, because he stunk of piss. So I left. I don't wish to give a bad impression of the Scotia. It was my kind of bar, dark and rough around the edges. The King of Glasgow picked me up from Ballater Street at 9:30 a.m, and we drove to Gurrock to catch the Dunoon ferry. As stated last year, I love ferries. En route we passed the Ferguson Marine shipyard in Port Glasgow, and the King said, with a wry smile,
Let's call in and see how it's progressing.
because it doesn't appear to have progressed since our 2020 visit. At Gurrock we drove on the ferry and I went to pay, but they didn't take cash,
I'll pay.
the King said,
I can claim it on expenses for shooting with erasedculture.
and with those few words he legitimised these videos. Something I'll continually remind him of. Thankfully they didn't take cash. The fee was £51, with no discount for penniless art gallery ponces. Sailing to Dunoon, I mentioned a motif idea for today's shoot to His Majesty.
Like a Gormley sculpture.
He said. No, not like Gormley's self-reverential nonsense, I tersely replied. I'd undertaken a few minutes researching Dunoon, and from this research informed the King that ex-Tory Minister Virginia Bottomley was born there, which resulted in a sceptical sideway glance from him. But it's true, Bottomley was born in Dunoon. Debarking the ferry, we made for Benmore Pier, where the King and a pal of his used to fish for mackerel, until she moved to Australia, leaving him without a fishing partner, which was a little inconsiderate. The pier was constructed by Boyd of Paisley for £300 in 1855, at its peak use attracting 4,000 dockings a year. However, it soon fell into decay, resulting repairs costing £700 being undertaken in 1891. 1976 saw the pier closed and left to fade, until it was purchased by Agnes Harvey, who fell in love with it and mortgaged her house to finance the purchase. Her efforts resulted in a 2005 completed refurbishment, allowing the pier to reopen for its 150th anniversary that year. The pier has remained open since, for all to enjoy, and along the handrails are memorial plaques of those that contributed to the pier's refurbishment fund. Opposite the pier is the Benmore Cafe where we lunched, me on a halloumi and sweet chilli wrap with salad, His Majesty ordering a smoked trout open sandwich, also with salad. The food was very good, as was the hot chocolate, but I turned down the offer of marshmallow and ice cream toppings. Just the thought of it almost gave me diabetes. Replete, we made our way to Benmore Botanic Garden. Not for long, mind. It started to rain and my footwear had only just dried out, so the pragmatic decision to give it a miss was made. Navigating the narrow winding roads, I saw a red squirrel, then another, and finally a third. They were the first red squirrels I've seen since Tufty in the 1970s road safety campaign. The Scottish Wildlife Trust website states over 75% of the UK's red squirrel population is found in Scotland, with representation in Northumbria and the Lake District south of the border. The King remarked, Glasgow squirrels are mostly the manky grey type. On the return ferry a rainbow appeared. I pointed and said to the King, these shooting trips bring carefree sunshine into your life, and now, rainbows. To which he snorted with derision. Back in Glasgow we undertook a driving recce of a location for next year's vid. We were supposed to cover it this year, but everyone knows how unreliable the King is. It came as no surprise it was raining again when my handbag brolly and I exited the hotel at 7 AM, wandering to Pacific Quay, shooting any footage I might just require, arriving back 2 hours later with water running out of my shoes. It's not all lemonade and free lunches making these vids. Showered and packed, I left the Ballater Street Premier Inn that had accommodated me for the last 5 nights and caught the 10:45 from Queen Street to Edinburgh, bidding Glasgow a sorrowful farewell, because I'm still hopelessly in love with you, sweetheart. Once again I encountered outrageous kindness and generosity while making this bid, with many thanks to William McClymont, Robert Kelsey, Furniture Went Mad, and of course special thanks to the King of Glasgow, because it's in his contract. Thank you.